Kash Patel privately told officials that Donald Trump's name is in the Epstein files, right before he sat under oath, and told the United States Senate the exact opposite. Read that sentence again slowly, because it is the sentence that changes absolutely everything. The FBI director privately told officials that the president's name is in the files. Then he sat before the United States Senate and stated there was no credible information connecting Jeffrey Epstein to anyone other than Epstein himself. Then he sat before the House Judiciary Committee and repeatedly refused to answer whether Trump's name appears in the files he controls. Finally, he told Congress that he had never spoken to the president about the Epstein files. 3 separate public positions, all of them meticulously documented, all of them now measured directly against the single sentence in a Wall Street Journal report that says he privately told officials exactly what the files contain. That is the central thread of this story. This is not one isolated contradiction. This is a documented pattern of specific things said privately and specific, entirely different things said publicly under oath, said in hearing rooms, said in front of cameras, said into the permanent congressional record, and the pattern does not stop with Kash Patel. A formal watchdog complaint documented that only a handful of communications from Patel, from Pam Bondi, and from Todd Blanche appear in over 2 million released pages of Epstein documents. This absence occurred despite their documented central role in deciding what gets released and what remains hidden. The complaint was formally filed by the Democracy Defenders Fund. It used the phrase, "deeply troubling." It explicitly said their communications had been impermissibly withheld. Every Republican on the House Judiciary Committee, except Thomas Massie, blocked a subpoena into Ghislaine Maxwell's transfer to a minimum security prison. That highly irregular transfer happened exactly 6 days after her interview with Trump's former personal defense attorney. The blocked subpoena would have required the Bureau of Prisons director to explain the decision. Dan Bongino, Patel's own deputy director, reportedly considered resigning over Patel and Bondi's refusal to release the full files. The man Patel personally chose as his second-in-command was so deeply troubled by what he was seeing that he contemplated walking away entirely. And through all of it, Representative Ted Lieu was in the hearing rooms, building the documented record. He was asking the specific questions, noting the specific non-answers, and stating publicly what the record was showing. On May 29th, Pam Bondi will sit under oath as a private citizen. No office, no department, no institutional protection. Every piece of this documented record will be in that room, waiting for her. This is the complete picture. Every piece of the documented record connected into one timeline, in sequence, exactly as it happened. No conclusions drawn for you, just the pure record. Let us start with the sentence that started everything. What Patel said privately versus what he said under oath. The Wall Street Journal report is specific. Patel had privately told officials that Trump's name is in the Epstein files. That report exists, and it is documented. Patel has not sued the Wall Street Journal over that specific claim. Now compare it to what Patel said publicly under oath at the Senate hearing in September 2025. Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana asked Patel directly, "Other than Epstein and Maxwell, according to the evidence you have, the number of other names is 0. Patel said that were charged based on credible evidence. Kennedy pressed, "So, the answer is no one." Patel responded, "For the information we have." At that exact same hearing, Patel told senators, "There is no credible information. None. If there were, I would bring the case yesterday that he trafficked to other individuals." At the House Judiciary Committee hearing the following day, Democratic Representative Eric Swalwell asked Patel whether Trump's name appears in the files. Patel evaded the question. He claimed he had never spoken to the president about the files themselves. He declined to say whether he had informed the Attorney General if the president's name is included. Swalwell asked again, and Patel evaded again. Representative Dan Goldman stated directly, "You are hiding the Epstein files. You are part of the cover-up." Patel shot back, "I'm not going to break the law to satisfy your curiosity." Goldman then asked, "Why haven't you gone to court to get the grand jury materials released? You did it for the grand jury testimony in the Mar-a-Lago case. Why not here?" Patel argued, "We are releasing as much as legally allowed." Goldman countered, "Sir, do you know how court orders work?" Goldman is a former federal prosecutor who spent years in the Southern District of New York. He was not asking whether Patel understood the general concept of court orders. He was asking a specific, documented question about why Patel had sought court permission to release grand jury materials in one context and not in another. Patel claimed they are constrained by search warrants and other materials from the 2000s and federal court rules. A federal judge had already addressed that specific argument in August 2025. A judge explicitly said, in ruling on a related matter, that the government is the logical party to disclose Epstein files in its custody. The court was not blocking the release. The court was saying the government should do it. And here is what makes the Wall Street Journal's sentence so significant in this context. Patel told officials privately that Trump's name is in the files. Then he refused under oath to confirm whether Trump's name appears in the files. Then he cited legal constraints as the reason more files could not be released. And then a judge said the government is the logical party to release what it has. Those four things exist simultaneously in the documented record. They do not resolve each other. They sit in tension with each other. On May 29th, Bondi will be asked about decisions made during her tenure as Attorney General about exactly this question. There is one additional documented piece of this specific thread. Representative Ted Lieu pushed Patel at the September 2025 hearing on the Trump birthday letter. The Wall Street Journal had reported that Trump allegedly wrote Epstein a letter for his 50th birthday, featuring the silhouette of a woman. Trump denied writing it and filed a lawsuit against the Journal's parent companies. The House Oversight Committee later released the birthday letter. Lieu asked Patel about it at the hearing. Patel's response opened a door he may not have intended to open. He said, "The estate of Jeffrey Epstein has a voluminous amount of information that they have not released." Lieu immediately challenged, "So wouldn't it be great if the FBI subpoenaed the estate of Jeffrey Epstein for all of that information?" Patel argued, "The estate is under no obligation to provide that material even pursuant to a subpoena." Lieu fired back, "That's just false. You're the freaking FBI." That exact exchange is in the permanent congressional record. The FBI director claimed the FBI cannot compel an estate to produce documents pursuant to a subpoena, while a former military prosecutor stated that is entirely false. Both statements are there, both are documented, and nobody has authoritatively resolved the factual dispute between them in any official proceeding. On the 6th of February 2026, the Democracy Defenders Fund filed a formal watchdog complaint with the Department of Justice. The complaint was about something highly specific and thoroughly documented. In the over 2 million pages of Epstein-related documents released under the Epstein Files Transparency Act, only a handful of communications from Pam Bondi, Todd Blanche, and Kash Patel appeared. The complaint called this deeply troubling. It noted that Bondi, Blanche, and Patel had spoken extensively on issues related to Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. They had held press conferences, testified before Congress, issued public statements, and made decisions about what to release and what to withhold. They had been absolutely central to the entire process. Yet only a handful of their communications appeared in over 2 million pages. The complaint alleged that the DOJ had impermissibly narrowed the scope of disclosed documents required under the Act. It stated the exemptions written into the law for victim privacy, national security, and ongoing investigations were largely inapplicable to the communications of Bondi, Blanche, and Patel. The DOJ's response was merely, "This is a tired narrative. Just because you wish something to be true doesn't make it is." That response is documented, but it is absolutely not an explanation of where the communications are. It is not a legal argument for why the exemptions apply. It is simply a statement that the allegation is tired and that wishing does not make things true. The complaint remains in the record, the DOJ response remains in the record, and the glaring question, where are the communications of the three most senior officials responsible for the release, has not been answered in any detailed way. On May 29th, Bondi can be asked directly, "Where are your communications related to the Epstein file release? Why do only a handful appear in over 2 million pages? What decisions did you make about what to include and what to exclude, and who did you communicate with about those decisions?" She will not be able to invoke the DOJ's position. She is no longer the Attorney General. She cannot direct a spokesperson to say the allegation is tired. She has to answer. The Patel dimension of this complaint is also highly documented and significant. Patel had made a very public statement when the first phase of files was released. He declared, "There will be no cover-ups, no missing documents, and no stone left unturned." He added, "Anyone from the prior or current Bureau who undermines this will be swiftly pursued. If there are gaps, we will find them. If records have been hidden, we will uncover them. No cover-ups, no missing documents, no stone left unturned." Then, a watchdog complaint documented that his own communications were largely absent from the released files. No cover-ups, no missing documents, and only a handful of the FBI director's communications appearing in 2 million pages. Those two things exist simultaneously in the public record. This leads to the Ghislaine Maxwell transfer that nobody could explain. This is the piece of the documented record that has received the least attention and that connects the most threads. After Todd Blanche, then Trump's personal criminal defense attorney and later Deputy Attorney General, conducted a 2-day interview with Ghislaine Maxwell, she was transferred to a minimum security prison in Texas. The facility is not designed for sex offenders. The transfer appears to violate both DOJ and Bureau of Prisons policies regarding convicted sex offenders. During that interview, Maxwell had described a circle of associates around Epstein that included people she characterized as currently being in the Trump cabinet. The controversial transfer happened exactly 6 days after that interview. At the September 17th House Judiciary Committee hearing, Republican Representative Thomas Massie and other members tried to subpoena the director of the Bureau of Prisons to provide testimony, documents, and communications with the DOJ, FBI, and White House related to the transfer decision. Every single Republican on the committee, except Massie, voted against the subpoena. It failed. Let that sit for a moment. A Republican congressman moved to compel testimony about why a convicted sex trafficker was transferred to a facility not suited for sex offenders. 6 days after she named Trump cabinet members in connection with Epstein, every other Republican on the committee voted to block that testimony. At the February 2026 hearing, Representative Adam Schiff asked Patel directly about the Maxwell transfer. Schiff asked, "The Bureau of Prisons decided entirely on their own, with no consultation from anyone, to transfer a convicted sex trafficker to a facility not suited for sex offenders immediately after she described Trump cabinet members in connection with Epstein." Patel replied, "I am not in the weeds on the everyday movements of inmates." Schiff pressed, "You want the American people to believe that?" Patel simply repeated, "I am not in the weeds on the everyday movements of inmates." That exact exchange is in the permanent congressional record. The FBI director's answer to why a convicted sex trafficker was moved to an inappropriate facility 6 days after naming cabinet members. In an interview conducted by the man who is now acting Attorney General is simply, "I am not in the weeds." The subpoena that would have produced testimony about the decision was blocked by Republicans. The communications of the officials responsible for that period are largely absent from the released Epstein files, and Todd Blanche, who conducted the interview 6 days before the transfer, is now the acting Attorney General responsible for deciding what happens to the remaining 2.5 million unreleased pages. On May 29th, Bondi can be asked, "Were you informed about the decision to transfer Ghislaine Maxwell? Did you approve it? Were you consulted by Blanche about anything Maxwell said in the interview before the transfer was made? What do you know about who authorized it? She was the Attorney General when it happened, and she has to answer." Then there is Dan Bongino, the insider who saw it from the inside and almost quit. Bongino is Kash Patel's deputy director at the FBI. Patel chose him. Patel brought him into the bureau. He is not an outside critic or a political opponent. He is the number 2 person at the agency that Patel runs. According to documented reporting, Bongino reportedly considered resigning over Patel and Bondi's refusal to release the full Epstein files. The man Patel selected as his deputy director was so troubled by what he was witnessing about the handling of the files that he contemplated walking away from the position. That is documented. It is sourced to reporting that has not been disputed by Bongino or the FBI, and it sits alongside 2 other documented facts about Bongino's role in this story. First, in a joint interview with Patel in May 2026 on Fox Business, Bongino told host Maria Bartiromo that Epstein had committed suicide. That is the official position, but the public reaction to that statement was documented and notable. Tucker Carlson criticized both Patel and Bongino, saying they were making a huge mistake promising to reveal things and then not revealing them. Alex Jones accused Patel of gaslighting. These are not voices from the political left criticizing the administration. These are figures within the same ideological orbit, expressing documented frustration with the gap between what was promised and what was delivered. Second, Bongino was reportedly involved in working on a memorandum with Patel and Blanche that rejected many of the claims about Epstein's death. 3 of the most senior officials, with access to the Epstein files, collaborated on a memo that reached specific conclusions. That memo shaped what was released publicly, and the communications of all 3 of those officials are largely absent from the released files. The Bongino dimension matters immensely because it illustrates something specific about the internal dynamics of this situation. This was not unanimous institutional consensus about how to handle the files. There was documented internal disagreement significant enough that the deputy director considered resigning, and that disagreement was not about whether to be transparent, it was about whether they were being transparent enough. The person who chose Bongino, who brought him into the FBI, who worked with him daily on the handling of these files, that is, Kash Patel, and Patel's own choice for deputy director, apparently reached a point where he considered whether staying was worth it. That is a documented fact. It is in the record, and it will be in the room on May 29th. Ted Lieu has been building this complete documented record across 5 consecutive hearings, spanning September 2025 to February 2026. His methodology is specific and worth understanding clearly, because it is the exact foundation of what May 29th will look like. He does not make accusations without documents. He does not make arguments without citations. He identifies a specific statement, finds a specific document that contradicts or complicates it, and then asks a specific question in a hearing room on the record. Over 5 hearings, that method produced a cumulative record that no single answer or deflection has resolved. At the Jew, The 17th of September 2025 House Judiciary hearing lay established two foundational documented contradictions. First, he pushed Patel on the FBI's subpoena authority over the Epstein estate. Patel said the estate was under no legal obligation to provide materials even pursuant to a subpoena. Liu responded, "That's just false. You're the freaking FBI." The underlying legal question has not been authoritatively resolved. Second, Liu asked about photos, referencing journalist Michael Wolff's taped interviews with Epstein. Interviews in which Epstein allegedly described connections to powerful people and showed photographs to Wolff. Liu asked whether the FBI had subpoenaed those tapes. Patel said he did not know. The FBI director did not know whether his own agency had subpoenaed material that Liu had publicly raised as significant. At the 11th of February 2026 House Judiciary hearing, Liu produced the exchange that led directly to the formal perjury accusation. He showed footage of Trump and Epstein together and asked Bondi directly about evidence. Bondi stated, "There is no evidence that Donald Trump has committed a crime." Liu then presented a 2-1-page internal DOJ slideshow summarizing witness testimony, a document released by the DOJ itself. He said on the record, "I believe you just lied under oath. I'm going to put up another document. I believe you just lied under oath. You need to interview this witness immediately." Bondi retorted, "Don't you ever accuse me of a crime." She did not explain the discrepancy between her statement and the document. She did not retract her statement. She simply challenged the accusation. On the 25th of February 2026, Liu and Representative Dan Goldman sent the formal perjury referral to Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. It identified Bondi's specific statement, cited specific documents, and requested the appointment of a special counsel. No special counsel was appointed. Blanche, who is now the acting Attorney General, did not respond publicly. The referral sits in the permanent record, and across all 5 hearings, Liu documented one consistent pattern-specific commitments made before power was acquired, specific different actions taken after power was acquired, and specific refusals to explain the gap between the two. He will be among the members with the most documented basis for questions on May 29th. The 14 months of Pam Bondi's tenure as Attorney General produced a documented record that is now waiting for her in the deposition room. In month 1, confirmed as Attorney General, she made a public statement that Epstein's client list was sitting on her desk right now to review. In months 2 through 5, the DOJ released initial Epstein documents, and a watchdog complaint was filed, noting only a handful of Bondi's communications appear in the released files. The DOJ's July 2025 memo concluded no credible evidence to charge any third party. In month 7, September 2025 hearings occurred, where Patel testified before the Senate and House. Liu's exchanges established the foundational contradictions. Massey voted with Democrats on a bank subpoena, and Republicans blocked the Maxwell transfer subpoena. In month 8, Massey's discharge petition passed 427-1, and the Epstein Files Transparency Act was signed into law. Month 9 saw a missed December deadline, publicly failed redaction technology, and blacked-out text revealed by simple copying and pasting. In month 10, a January 30th release of 3.5 million pages exposed victims' names, redacted co-conspirators' names, and survivors described thousands of mistakes. In month 11, at the February 11th hearing lasting 5 hours, survivors sat in the gallery. Liu made his perjury accusation. Massey confronted about Les Wexner, and Bondi called Raskin a washed-up loser lawyer. Bondi would not turn around and face the survivors. And the DOJ was photographed with a congresswoman's search history. In month 12, the perjury referral was filed in writing. a subpoena was voted on bipartisanly, and Bondi faced a formal contempt mechanism for the first time. In month 13, a March 17th subpoena was formally issued for an April 14th deposition. In month 14, Trump said, "I think it's time." Bondi was fired on April 2nd, 16 days before the deposition. On April 14th, Bondi did not appear, and a contempt resolution was filed 45 minutes later. May 29th was announced 14 months. One promise on live television, one DOJ memo contradicting it, 5 hearings, one formal perjury accusation in writing, one bipartisan subpoena, one no-show, one contempt resolution, and one new date that she cannot avoid. That is the documented timeline of her tenure. It is the context for every single question waiting on May 29th. May 29th is a transcribed interview. It is not a public hearing. The cameras may or may not be present, depending on whether Democrats' demand for filming is granted, but the transcript will be made. And a transcript is a permanent record that will be compared against every prior statement in the documented record. Here are the specific documented questions waiting for her. On the client list, you said publicly on Fox News that Epstein's client list was sitting on your desk right now to review. Was that accurate? If yes, why did the DOJ's subsequent official memo say there was no such list? If no, what were you referring to? On the perjury accusation, at the February 11th hearing, you stated under oath that there is no evidence that Donald Trump committed a crime. Representatives Leo and Goldman subsequently sent a formal perjury referral to the Deputy Attorney General, citing a specific DOJ document that they said contradicted that statement. Is your February 11th statement accurate? And if so, how do you reconcile it with the document they cited? On the watchdog complaint, a formal watchdog complaint documented that only a handful of your communications appear in over 2 million released pages of Epstein documents, despite your central role in the release process. Where are those communications? Were they withheld? Were they destroyed? Were they excluded from the release by a deliberate decision? Who made that decision? On the Maxwell transfer, Ghislaine Maxwell was transferred to a minimum security facility not suitable for sex offenders 6 days after her interview with Todd Blanche. Were you consulted about that transfer? Did you approve it? Were you informed by Blanche about anything Maxwell said in the interview before the transfer was made? On Les Wexner, Thomas Massey documented that Wexner's name was redacted from FBI documents that labeled him as a co-conspirator. Your testimony was that the name was restored within 40 minutes. Who made the decision to redact it in the first place? Was that a systematic policy decision or an individual decision? Did you know about it before Massey raised it? On the survivors. At the February 11th hearing, Representative Jayapal asked you to turn around and face the survivors sitting directly behind you. You declined. What was the basis for that decision? On the missing 2.5 million pages, the DOJ identified approximately 6 million pages as potentially responsive to the Transparency Act. Approximately 3.5 million were released. What happened to the other 2.5 million? What was the basis for not releasing them? Were your communications with Blanche and Patel about those decisions included in the release? On the Wall Street Journal report, the Wall Street Journal reported that Patel privately told officials that Trump's name is in the Epstein files. Under oath, he declined to confirm whether Trump's name appears in the files. He said publicly there is no credible information connecting Epstein to anyone other than Epstein. He said publicly there will be no cover-ups and no missing documents. A watchdog complaint documented that his communications are largely absent from the released files. A judge dismissed his defamation lawsuit against Frank Figliuzzi. This is the complete documented picture as of this recording. Kash Patel privately told officials Trump's name is in the Epstein files. Under oath, he declined to confirm whether Trump's name appears in the files. He said publicly, "There is no credible information connecting Epstein to anyone other than Epstein." He said publicly, "There will be no cover-ups and no missing documents." A watchdog complaint documented that his communications are largely absent from the released files. A judge dismissed his defamation lawsuit against Frank Figliuzzi. He filed a $250 million lawsuit against The Atlantic over reporting that he was erratic and often drunk. That lawsuit is pending. He is still FBI director. Ted Lieu says publicly that he is next. Tucker Carlson says he made a huge mistake by promising to reveal things and then not revealing them. Pam Bondi said the client list was on her desk. The DOJ said there was no list. She testified for 5 hours. Survivors sat behind her, and she would not turn around. Her communications are largely absent from the released files. She was formally accused of perjury in writing by 2 former prosecutors. She was subpoenaed by a bipartisan committee. She was fired with 4 words. She skipped the deposition. Contempt was filed. May 29th was announced 45 minutes later. She has no office. She has no protection. And she has to answer the questions on May 29th. Ted Lieu built the documented record across 5 hearings. The perjury referral sits unanswered. The watchdog complaint sits unanswered. The Maxwell transfer subpoena was blocked, and on May 29th, he will have the opportunity to ask in a transcribed interview the questions that have been in the record for more than a year. Todd Blanche conducted the Maxwell interview, was present when she described Trump cabinet members, became acting attorney general when Bondi was fired, and said on his first night in the job that the Epstein matter should not be part of anything going forward. His communications are largely absent from the released files. He is responsible for the remaining 2.5 million pages. Massey's 30-day compliance warning is documented and public. Dan Bongino reportedly considered resigning over the refusal to release the full files. He is still deputy director. His reported near resignation is in the public record. The Maxwell transfer is unexplained. The subpoena into it was blocked. The Bureau of Prisons made the decision on their own, according to Patel. Blanche conducted the interview 6 days before the transfer. 2.5 million pages are still missing. The prison guard on duty the night Epstein died is still scheduled for congressional testimony. The GAO investigation into DOJ compliance is ongoing. The DOJ Inspector General investigation is ongoing. May 29th is 20 days away from this recording. On May 29th, for the very first time, a former Attorney General of the United States will sit in a room without institutional protection, without the ability to invoke department positions, without the authority to redirect or deflect, and will answer specific questions about specific decisions she made that are now in the documented public record. The questions are built. The record is complete. The room is waiting, and the sentence that started this video is still in the Wall Street Journal. Kash Patel privately told officials that Trump's name is in the Epstein files. Then he said the exact opposite under oath. That gap between what was said privately and what was said publicly is what every question on May 29th is ultimately about. She was the Attorney General. She was responsible. She has to answer. Subscribe and turn on notifications. This channel covers every development with verified sources and documented evidence. We will be here when May 29th happens, when the transcript is released, and when the next phase of this accountability chain begins, because this story does not end when someone sits down in that room. It ends when the questions get answered. What do you think the transcript will ultimately reveal? Leave your thoughts in the comments below.